Hello, everyone. This is Lori Barnes. I'm here to talk to you about the upcoming full moon in Taurus. So to kick off today's episode, I want to share the dates. The full moon will be here on Tuesday, November the 8th, and the time will be around 3 o'clock in the morning. So really early in the morning if you're on the west coast of the United States, and around 6 o'clock in the morning if you're on the east coast of the US, and around 12:20 around lunchtime if you're in Rome, Italy, like me. A full moon is halfway through a moon cycle, and our cycle kicked off at the new moon in Scorpio. That happened a couple of weeks ago. So a full moon is like a culmination. It's like a lot of energy, and things can come to a peak. They can come to an end. You can find that you are full of something. It's a time of a lot of energy, and we have the most moonlight in the sky because the moon becomes as full as it can be, where it's taking in as much light from the sun as possible. And once we reach that exact full moon, it will go to the other side, the waning side, where the moon starts losing light and goes into the second half of the cycle until this particular moon cycle ends with the new moon. Our next new moon will be in Sagittarius, and that's coming up later this month on November the 23rd. So we're going to focus on this cycle, and there's quite a lot going on at this full moon. You may already feel the rising tension, the rising energy that's happening around us as we move into this full moon. And you may already know that it's not just a full moon, but it's a lunar eclipse. We had an eclipse, a solar eclipse at the new moon, which was around October 25th. And that was a new moon in Scorpio. And that was the solar eclipse. And so eclipses come in pairs. Every now and then you get an eclipse season where there's actually 3 of them, but there's always a pair. We had the solar eclipse at the new moon, and now we have the lunar eclipse at the full moon. This lunar eclipse is a total eclipse. It's going to be visible in Asia, Australia, North America, and parts of Northern and Eastern Europe. Most of South America, you'll be able to see it as well. And if you want to check specifically for your location, I use timeanddate.com. They have a section just for eclipses, and you can find out more information. You can even see a video of the path of the eclipse, which is always interesting to see. The first thing to look at are the signs. So the moon is going to be in Taurus. It's a Taurus full moon, and the sun is in Scorpio. So a full moon is always the sun and the moon in opposite signs, or a pair of signs being opposite of each other. And Taurus is an earth sign, so this is an earth full moon. It's very much about the tangible things that you can touch, the earth, how we nurture ourselves, the senses, like how you take pleasure or enjoy sensual things. Sight, sound, taste, feel. The senses are very much a Taurus type of focus area. You want to think about eating healthy and looking at your routines, your day-to-day activities. The Taurus sign is one who's very good about maintaining a routine, keeping a status quo, very reliable, very practical, very down to earth. It's an earth sign, very good about keeping the day-to-day rhythm in place, and would not enjoy so much a lot of disruption or a lot of chaos, where whatever happens in a day, it's preferable that there's excitement. That's really not as much of a Taurus thing. That is more of your air fire sign kind of thing. But the earth signs, especially, like the practicality, like the groundedness that you think of when you think about an earth sign. It's also related to what grows in the earth. So not just sensual as in the taste pleasure, but actually growing your own food and cooking your own food, making healthy, hearty meals. Scorpio, on the opposite side of the zodiac and the sign that the sun is traveling through, is in Scorpio. And where Taurus is very grounded and likes to have the feet planted on the ground, Scorpio is a highly spiritual sign. Scorpio likes to go deep into matters, into philosophical matters or spiritual matters, likes to peel back the layers, kind of like psychology, like getting into the depth of things, and can go very far into the ethereal side of things and not be as planted on the ground, you could say, would prefer to be analyzing or researching something, going deep into subject matter, and can kind of get lost in those things, can be somewhat obsessive, if you know any Scorpios. These are the two signs that are prominent in the moon phase, the full moon phase, with the moon being in Taurus and the sun being in Scorpio, shining the light on the Taurus full moon. Adding on the lunar eclipse, eclipses can be wild cards. It can indicate a time where something happens that changes your trajectory in life. The important thing to keep in mind is that a lot of times people don't have anything significant that happens around an eclipse because it isn't activating something specifically in your chart. You really want to know if you have anything on or around 16 degrees of Taurus or Scorpio or Aquarius or Leo, because those four signs are at the 90-degree angle of each other. They're all what we call the fixed signs. They all tend to have some stubborn nature in some way, shape, or form of holding on to the status quo, maintaining the status quo. The fixed signs are the ones that keep things in place. And there's a lot of this fixed energy that's happening at the time of this full moon. One other thing I want to say, though, about an eclipse is that the things that can be activated in your chart by an eclipse may not happen right at that moment in time. What we see is often that degree gets activated later on as a planet either passes over the same degree in the sign of Taurus in this case, or by a different kind of relationship. So I mentioned earlier the four fixed signs: Leo, Aquarius, Taurus, Scorpio. Any planet crosses any of those signs in 16 degrees, it could activate that point in your chart, and that's when something that is related to the eclipse can come up. Now, that might be a little confusing. I wrote a blog and it's going to list the dates of activations. I went and I listed all of the dates in 2023 when a planet is going to make contact with the point of the eclipse that's happening Tuesday. So you can track that, check that out, see if that is pertinent for your personal chart. Let's talk a little bit more about this Taurus Scorpio energy. There can be a bit more idealism and stubbornness at this full moon. There's this concept of Taurus Scorpio, of fixed energy. There can be this need for integration between what is intangible, spiritual, philosophical, and what is real and true and rational, practical, having your feet on solid ground. You know, those are the two ends of Scorpio and Taurus. This fixed energy can be quite stubborn. Both of those signs can be quite stubborn in and of themselves. I'm going to talk about Mars retrograde in a little bit. There's this quality of our time that is definitely asking us to look at the amount of time we're spending on different things. How are we spending our energy? Are we spending our energy, putting our energy towards the things that are most important to us in life? Or are we straying away from what's important? And this could be a time where we need to cut back on some things. So there's this Mars retrograde thing going on that we cannot think about this full moon and ignore the other things that are happening because they synthesize and work together. Think about this fixed full moon, and there's this stubbornness to it, this desire maybe to keep things the way they are, to not make any changes. It can be very difficult when there is this stubbornness and wanting to not make change. If you are someone who really struggles with making changes, then this period of time may bring to light for you areas where it's time to let go of outworn things that are no longer working for you. And if you're someone who thrives on change and you're a very adaptable person, then you are probably already in the process of evaluating your schedule and how you're using your time and your energy and making some changes that will work out better for you. We have time with the Mars retrograde. And even with this eclipse, since things don't always happen right at that time, you can use this period to start being aware of where you might be stuck and where you might need to make some cuts. And that can be, anywhere, any domain of life, because we all have a chart, and where these things are happening is in different places for different people. And of course, the chart covers all areas of life, but depending on where these things fall, it clarifies which part of life we're referring to. And when I say making cuts, I want to be very clear. I'm saying this in a healthy way of removing things that clear the path for forward movement in a positive way. And then most of the time I'm talking about theoretical, although Taurus is definitely a sign for gardening in the earth. So you may literally want to go outside and cut the weeds out of your garden. The next thing I'm going to talk about is Uranus. It is a planet that is about change, oftentimes disruptive change or unexpected change, but it can be very positive change. It can be welcome. It's like, oh, finally this thing happened and now it cleared that away and now I can move forward. Uranus is really prominent in this full moon because it's the exact same degree and sign as the Taurus full moon. Uranus is in the sign of Taurus at 16 degrees. So it brings on this quality of there can be some surprises and there could be some unexpected thing that happens that changes things from the trajectory you thought that you would be going on. And out in the world, we will probably see some things, some surprising things happen on Tuesday. I mean, if you live in the United States, you know that the election is happening on Tuesday. And so, you know, there's this wild card of what's going to happen, you know, probably something unexpected is going to happen. But with Uranus there and you want to take it to your own personal chart, it's really going to depend on if you have something around 16 degrees Taurus or Scorpio or Aquarius or Leo, because those are the ones that are going to be activated and they're at these 90-degree angle tension points. And oftentimes we need some sort of tension to push us to grow, to push us to make change. This full moon lunar eclipse is very much about bringing to your awareness something that needs changed. And they're in the fixed sign. So it means that things could be very stuck. Things could be in a rut, or it can be things that you don't want to change, things that you're really holding on to, like with a very tight grip. And they need to be shaken loose a little bit so you can see where change is needed. There's also the North Node and the South Node. They always travel in pairs and always in opposing signs. They are traveling through Scorpio and Taurus. It takes about 1.5 years for the nodes to travel through one whole sign. They are involved in the eclipse. And they have something to do with fate, and they have to do with where we came from and where we're going. The North Node is with the moon and with Uranus and in the sign of Taurus. So this is saying that there's something to be gained out of this eclipse, and it has to do with things that are practical, things that have to do with the ground under our feet, and with anything that's related to Taurus, anything that has to do with, you know, fertility, food growth, things under the earth. The South Node is over there with the sun in Scorpio. And at the time of the eclipse and the full moon, the sun's going to be joined by Mercury and Venus. So there's quite a lot of activity in Scorpio and Taurus at the full moon. And with the nodes there, there's this, you know, fated quality to it that whatever happens, it was like it had to happen so that certain other things can happen and things just start moving. You know, I said earlier that trajectory could be changed. What we thought before may be changed after. And so it'll be interesting to see what comes up on Tuesday, and then to also watch those movements of the planets and as they activate that same degree over time. What makes this Taurus full moon lunar eclipse even more interesting is that we have the planet Saturn traveling through the sign Aquarius. And as you've heard me say, Aquarius is one of those fixed signs, and it is at the 90-degree angle to both the sun and the moon. So Saturn is there activating both sides, kind of like a referee or a pressure point. Could be that it's in your personal chart, in your personal life, it can show up as an event or a person or a thing that somehow creates a boundary, a limit. You are maybe blocked in doing something, or you have to take on more responsibility about something. And it has you looking to these two sides of Taurus and Scorpio to try to figure out, how am I going to maneuver this? How am I going to maneuver where I have my routine and my feet firmly planted on the ground, and I'm pretty clear what life is supposed to look like day to day? And then Scorpio on the other side saying, I want to go deeper into this. I want to know more. I want to know the meaning behind this. I want to know what spiritual value I'm going to get out of this, getting down deep into the bottom of things, And here's Saturn over here, kind of in the middle, saying, in Saturn's in Aquarius. So Aquarius is about reform and innovation and doing things independently in your own style. And so Saturn's kind of saying, I want to make change. I want to move forward, not backwards. And of course, remember those nodes are involved too. So this is all what's going on in the sky. Now, it may or may not be activating things in your chart. So if you're feeling intensely something like the energy I'm describing, then probably something in your chart's getting activated. If you're like, no, I'm kind of good, like I'm not really affected by all this, but I see it out there in the news, then it's more likely that your chart isn't as activated because maybe you don't have anything around 16 degrees of those fixed signs. The intensity of what you may be feeling around this is going to depend on what you have in your chart. Of the 7 personal planets, which is, the sun, moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Saturn, Jupiter, 5 of those planets are in fixed signs at this full moon. And that's pretty significant. And you have Saturn over there in a fixed sign, just trying to say, how are we going to make progress, make change in a slow, disciplined, structured way? Because it's a North Node lunar eclipse. There's really this forward-looking, progress-oriented energy happening. On the backdrop of all of that, remember that Mars is retrograde, just went retrograde on October the 30th. There's another video that I made just on Mars retrograde, so you can go deeper into that. It's good to keep in mind that the Mars retrograde message is about evaluating what's going on with your energy expenditure, especially your physical energy. It also has to do with your inner motivations, your inner drive to go and get things done. Mars is about getting things done. Since Mars is retrograde, we're already feeling maybe more fatigued physically. Your day becomes more difficult. You might be thinking, gosh, I do this all the time, but for some reason lately, it's just so hard to get through the day. I'm tired. I don't want to do it. And this is a time period to evaluate how you're spending your time. And are you spending it in a way where you are satisfied? Is it taking you where you want to go? When you think about where do you want to be in 3, 6, 9 months, a year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and you look back to where you are today and what you're doing today. Are you spending your energy the way that is going to open the road or pave the road to where you want to go? And if it's not, during the Mars retrograde is a really good time to pivot, to switch gears, and take the whole retrograde to figure out how you're going to do that. And you'll have until January when Mars goes direct, and then until March through the end of its post shadow to figure that out. So you don't have to get all that figured out right now under the Taurus full moon lunar eclipse, but just knowing that that energy is going on in the background while all this other stuff is happening this coming up week. So it's a pretty intense time that we're going into. And even if your chart is not as activated and you're not feeling this energy directly in your life, you're very likely going to see it around you. You're going to see people that are struggling with clinging on to how things have been, not wanting to make change. And the opposite, the Scorpio side of things, which is to analyze things, research things, look at the psychology behind things, finding kind of like a spiritual purpose for how things are being done. And, what we're seeing in the world, this polarization in the world, can really be highlighted this coming up week. And I think that asks us to look inside of our own personal lives, like the macro to the micro. How is this showing up in our lives? Are we engaging in this polarity in our own lives as it happens around us in the greater world? And there's this need for integration, of opening ourselves up to different perceptions so that we can find a way to compromise. I mean, if anything, this energy, I think, is calling us out in the world and saying, hey, you human beings, if you don't find a way to compromise, things aren't going to get better. Things can't keep going the way that they're going. And people are on different sides, it seems like, in both sides with their heels stuck in the mud and not wanting to change, to accept that other people have other views. And that's just not going to work ongoing. This eclipse season may be activating how we break up this stubborn energy and pushing us to find some reform, some progress. That's not going to be easy. And I'm really curious to see how this shakes out over the next 6 months to a year. I'm hoping that we see that this time launches a new time period of progress, but right now it's a challenging time. But bringing it back to us, we all like to focus on our own life and our own chart and, what does this mean for me? And how can I use this energy in the most productive way? I have a few ideas for you. I'll start off with what you can do for your smell sense, and that's essential oils. And I always talk about essential oils in my moon videos because I think that they can really help your mood, and you can change the type of essential oils you use to work with the mood that you want to create. So I chose some different oils for you to help over the next week with this energy that's already building right now. The first one is vetiver, and it will help to ground you. If you're feeling ungrounded, put some in your diffuser to help you just feel rooted. If you would like an essential oil to help address feeling stuck or stubborn, maybe you really do want to make a change, but you also know that there's this thing inside of you that's not wanting to. There's this stubbornness. And it can be quite frustrating because you can have both sides in yourself, right? Like, oh, I want to do that, but I can't let go of this. And this oil, essential oil, wintergreen, can help open yourself up, to be more accepting and to help you through some stubbornness. So this one that I just mentioned is wintergreen. And to go along with that is some rosemary to help kind of open your mind, or to open yourself to open-mindedness. The next one is cypress, and that can help when you're feeling stuck and you want to manifest progress. It's a pretty woody oil. I really like it. Cypress is the name. Now, I talked about Mars retrograde earlier, and I have a whole video on Mars retrograde. And one of the things that I think, like, the metaphor of the whole cycle is to lighten your load. Like, we're carrying this burden, and so it takes us longer to get somewhere. And during this Mars retrograde, if we can just lighten our load, like, get some things off of our back, cut things out of our schedule, clear out the overgrown metaphorical garden that's our schedule, like, what is there that can be cut out so that you have more free space? And the oil that I'm recommending to help with that is called Lang Lang. That will help ease the burden and lighten the load. And then I have one more recommendation for you, and it's because I just got this oil for the first time. I've heard of it. I've known the name for many, many years, and I've never actually bought it, and I've never used it until now, and I love it. It's called Arbor Vitae. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but it's spelled Arborvitae. Also called Thuja plicata, Thuja. And it just is this very distinct aroma. It is a tree, and this tree is called the tree of life, which I think is pretty cool. And since Taurus is an earth sign and we're talking about a full moon in Taurus, I thought it would be nice to share a tree oil. That's what's in my diffuser right now. It's the only thing in there. And I've had it for a few days, and every day I'm like, oh, what am I going to diffuse? And then it's like, I know what I want to diffuse, and it's Arbor Vitae because it smells so good. So I would recommend trying that one out. If you're looking to get a new oil for your collection, you could try that one. It goes well with most of these oils that I mentioned, maybe not wintergreen, but vetiver and cypress. I think that they would all go well together. So that's one thing that can help you as we go through. I'm going to give you some inspirational quotes that I thought went along well with the vibe of this new moon. The first one goes like this: the world becomes a better place when people get busy doing what they love instead of trashing what they hate. Couldn't find the author, it was unknown. And I think that this relates to the Taurus full moon lunar eclipse because there's so much fixed energy and stubborn energy, and there's this idealistic quality and being focused on what you think is the best thing. And when we forget that other people have other views on what the best thing is or the best way to do things, we can get too focused on that instead of keeping it focused on what we want, what we enjoy, what we love. During this time, if you find yourself aggravated a lot, especially with other people and politics, then my suggestion to you is to refocus yourself on the things that you do stand for, what you do enjoy. Just kind of bring it back to what you like, not what you don't like. You know, the whole idea of the law of attraction is to focus on what you want, not what you don't want, because whatever you're focusing on, that's what comes. So when you're focusing on something that you don't want, you're actually manifesting that. During this time period, and really generally all the time, it's good advice to focus on what you want. The next quote is from Laura Ingalls Wilder, and she says, "Persons appear to us according to the light we throw upon them from our own minds." And I thought, oh, that's pretty cool, because that's what the sun is doing to the moon. The sun is always casting light onto the moon, unless it's a new moon. And that's how the moon shows its light. How we see people is how we project ourselves onto those people. And I do think that this full moon is going to bring up a lot of projecting. I think people are generally going to see in other people what they don't want to see in themselves. And this might be hard and harsh to hear, but if you do find yourself really being upset and really focusing on another person, it's probably a message to you that in some way, shape, or form, it's actually you who is doing that behavior or, exhibits those kinds of character traits. Now, you might immediately be like, oh, no, I am nothing like her. But there's probably something deeper in there to figure out that is a part of you that you don't want to embrace. And that is the Scorpio side. That is when you start peeling back the layers and you start becoming honest with yourself and you start going deeper and deeper and deeper. That's a very Scorpio type of energy. Whereas Taurus may be very practical and only wanting to see what is right in front of you and just keep the status quo, right? So that's kind of that Scorpio Taurus thing, going back to that. And then you have Saturn, the 90-degree angle to both, trying to break it up, challenging both sides, putting tension on both sides to make a change, to break out of that. But unlike if it was an air sign or a fire sign, this is an earth sign and a water sign, both, and fixed signs that are very stubborn. So these are things that are stubbornly clinging on to the status quo, whereas change is clearly somewhere coming into this full moon. The last quote that I have for you is from Whitney Wolfe Herd, Herd, and she says, "Life is about perspective and how you look at something. Ultimately, you have to zoom out." And I think this is really great advice this coming week as you go through the motions of the week. If you hit challenges or if you don't, if you're thinking about zooming out in perspective, do it. But especially if you're hitting something challenging, or if you think that there may be some of this projection stuff that I was mentioning before, try to zoom out. Try to just take a step back from the situation, look at it from a different place and consider it from different viewpoints. And if you're really struggling, try to put yourself in another person's shoes. Well, what if this was happening to my mom? What if this was happening to my child? What if this was happening to my best friend? How would it look different for them than for me? To try to get a different perspective. So those are the 3 quotes that I have for you. And now for things to actually do on the full moon and under this full moon phase. So I have written a ritual to do for each of the elements for the full moons. There's one for Earth, and I'm going to include a link in the blog, and I'll also include a link below the video. If you want to do that ritual, you can get that for free. It's one of my free resources on my website. Another thing to do on the Taurus full moon, or leading up to it or the few days after it, is to go on a spiritual quest. Take some time and do a meditation and actually try to think about it from a spiritual perspective of peeling back the layers of what's going on in your life. And if you do know where Taurus and Scorpio fall in the houses of a chart, that's the circle and the different pieces, then I would specifically go on a spiritual quest around the areas of life that are activated by this full moon. The sun in Scorpio, that's a water sign, and then Taurus is the earth. You can think water, earth, going out and hiking, or going on a trail, or going by the ocean, or any body of water. Those could be interesting things to do. Or even if you live near a well, that could be kind of cool to do a meditation by a well, because a well really represents Scorpio, like that deep body of still water. The last thing that I'm recommending on the actual full moon for your ritual is to appreciate beauty in your environment. Taurus is a Venus sign, and Taurus very much is known for having an appreciation of beauty. You could find a lot of peace and calm in this chaotic time by noticing beauty around you and appreciating that beauty. The whole metaphor, stopping to smell the roses, that would be something to do on Tuesday, especially if you don't have much time, but you know that there's a pretty park nearby, or you can drive by something in your car on the way home from work, or you have something beautiful in your home, or find the most beautiful part of your home, the part you appreciate the most, and get your essential oils going and have some nice lighting, maybe put on some soft music or music that you enjoy. And before or after, make a really healthy meal that's hopefully made with, local food or organic food, and, or a nice organic tea, and really feed your senses on this full moon. The full moon phase will go until the next new moon. And so some things that you can do during the time period between the full moon and the next new moon is go out to a park or a botanical garden and admire nature. And anything that's nature that, you can think of. Those are just a couple of examples, but your area better than I do. And depending on where you live, go out and enjoy the kind of nature that is near you. I live in Rome, so I can go out and see some amazing ruins, or I can go to the aqueducts, or I can go to the ocean. I could even go to the mountains. If you live out in the country, it can be, looking at some beautiful flowers or a forest or some trees. If you live in the desert, there's desert gardens. There's some like amazing beauty in the deserts. Figure out what is beautiful to you and admire it and appreciate it. Even, art from an art museum could work as well. If you have a garden, do gardening, weed your garden, give it some attention. You could sit in your garden, meditate in your garden, weed your garden, anything like that. Bless it, read your flowers some poems, talk to your flowers, things like that. The sign Taurus is about the earth and what grows in it. So go to an organic farmer's market, get some fresh veggies, some fresh fruit, support your local people, locally made honey, things like that. It's a good time to research about climate change and do something that supports Mother Nature, whatever fits with your values and philosophies. Do things that please your senses under the full moon phase would be wonderful. Your sound, smell, touch, taste, sight, any of those things. Enjoy your creature comforts. It's a very Taurus thing to enjoy your creature comfort. You could get a massage or do any kind of body work. Bringing in the Mars retrograde to this, just move at a slower pace. Notice how you're feeling. Notice if you're feeling fatigued. You might want to do less of an intense workout than normal. You may want to do it less often or less intense. That's really important because there's just a greater possibility of feeling more fatigued during this full moon phase, but also that can extend past that because Mars retrograde is going to go until January, and then it still has a post retrograde shadow period before it picks up its speed. That's all I have for you today for the full moon in Taurus and lunar eclipse. I hope you've come away from this video feeling more prepared for what to do and what to expect. And of course, if you would like to go deeper in your chart, please set up a consultation with me. I'd be happy to do your chart and we can talk about where these signs fall in your chart and what Mars retrograde may be doing and where the Taurus and Scorpio signs fall for the full moon. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.